Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel, Knits by Mandy. My name is Amanda, and in this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to keep your yarn stash manageable, as well as do a little yarn stash clean out of my own. Last spring, I did a knit flip series where I renovated some existing items in my hand knit wardrobe, and this year I think I'm long overdue for a bit of a yarn stash clean out and reorganization. Before we get into the nitty gritty of what's in my stash and reorganizing it, I want to share a little bit about my philosophy when it comes to buying yarn, collecting yarn, and how I keep it manageable in a somewhat of a smaller space. I'm always trying to take a critical eye to my consumption habits and looking where I can spend less, but I also want to balance that with feeling like I'm not limiting myself for my hobby by restricting myself so much. I talked about this in a recent knit and chat, but I keep most of my yarn collection in an ottoman that's a part of my couch, and I really try to keep it to that area. That's what works for me. I know some people feel really inspired by being surrounded by lots of different yarn and having lots of different options. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why that might work for other people and not for others. Some of my philosophies and ideas that I share may be helpful if you're trying to reduce your consumption, you're trying to pare down your stash. Maybe if you've recently stashed down and you want to keep it to a smaller amount, some of these things that I'll share may be helpful. I think it's always important to take a critical eye at our consumption and figure out what's working for us. Let me share my tips on how I keep my stash manageable for me. It's also pretty a subjective term. For me, having a manageable stash is being able to feel like I can still be creative with the amount of yarn that I have. I can pull stuff out for different projects while also feeling like I'm not overwhelmed by the amount of yarn that I have. It's not taking over the space that I'm living in, and I'm also not feeling anxious because I have basically money sitting on the shelves. I definitely don't like to have a lot of extra spare sweater quantities or big quantities of yarn sitting around. That just makes me feel a little anxious. It makes me feel a little overwhelmed, and I feel like I need to rush through things so I can start using yarn. So that's part of my approach. Another part that informs my approach is just practicality. I live in a city, I've lived in apartments, I lived in a studio apartment when I was really getting into knitting and content creation around my knitting. Being limited by certain space requirements has also kind of informed how I consume not only knitting but other things as well. My first tip, if you want to make your stash feel more manageable, is to physically limit yourself to one area or a couple areas of your home. For me, what works is I have my ottoman full of yarn, which you'll see later, and I have a few baskets here and there where I still can display some yarns so I can get that visual inspiration that you can get by just surrounding yourself by nice things. One thing that I try to employ with not only just yarn but other things in my life, if I have to start buying more storage for something or structures like shelves and things to store more stuff, then there's probably enough stuff that I already have that I can either get rid of or I don't have to hold on to. I do that for the books I have. I try to keep it to these two shelves that you see behind me, and I do it for yarn as well. If I know that I am kind of running out of space, the ottoman's getting a little tight, I will kind of pull back on the yarn shopping and things like that. It can be hard to try to limit yourself, but I find knowing that I have this much in this space is helpful, a parameter, so I don't kind of go crazy when I go yarn shopping or go to a new yarn store. And it helps me also keep tabs on things and I know where things are. So I don't have a shoebox under the bed here and a box hidden in my closet. I kind of have an idea of all the different yarns that I have, even if they aren't always out on display. Next tip I have is to be a bit judicious with the amount of whips that you have, and that might be a little bit of a hot take. I've been more or less a monogamous knitter. I at most maybe have 3 whips going on at once. I had 3 things on my needles this winter, and I could really only dedicate attention to 2 things at a time. I know that it can work differently for other people. By keeping the cast-on-itis at bay, it also helps your consumption at bay as well. I also find that working maybe more intentionally on 1 or 2 projects at a time, I think it helps me think about for longer the next things that I want to start making, and keeps me from making or casting on things that I might regret later. Which, if you do cast something on and you regret it, you can always frog it and reknit it. It's not the worst thing in the world. It can help you maybe save some time and just have more of a vision of what you want to do as you're moving through projects. I'm not a big vision board or mood board or Pinterest person, but I do like to every once in a while just take a peek at my Ravelry, look at my queue, look to what's speaking to me, think about what the weather's gonna be like, think about what my wardrobe needs are as I'm kind of making the decision about what I'm going to knit next. Given that that more time to almost like let those ideas seep in your mind is helpful, or creating, I guess, a more intentional creative process. And of course, I think everyone's balance between having a number of whips or a number of just like yarn in your home that feels overwhelming is going to be different for everyone. 1 to 2 whips at a time is kind of what works for me before I kind of start to like lose sight and like not pay as close attention to things. And I always like to say on my channel that knitting's not a race. There's no gold medal for like whipping through things quickly or completing things fast. Sometimes I think it's easy to feel some kind of external pressure to want to complete your items quickly, but like at the end of the day, there's no reward for you at the end other than that finished object. And I like to remind myself a lot of that as well. Another recommendation that I have is to intentionally work stash busting projects into your like whip queue or your knitting routine. This can look different depending on the size of your stash, depending on the different yarns in your stash. But for me, a stash busting project is a project that will help me get rid of like half skeins or other things that are just kind of like sitting around my yarn stash. And I'll show you a few of my stash busting projects that I made. It was 2 summers ago that I made this scrappy pillow. I actually have a vlog about it if you want to go back and watch it. It's very well loved by my cat Sassy. It's basically become a cat bed for her. I'll quickly show you the other side, which is just like saturated with her hair. But I made this pillow by using the excavation blanket pattern, which you may have seen. It's a free blanket pattern on Ravelry. I made 2 squares of equal sizes, and then I kind of just tied the fringe together to make this little throw pillow. I had it on our bed for the longest time, and then like almost 1.5 years into having my cat, she like really took a liking, and I think she's really taken a liking to the like fabric of knit texture, which I mean is great for me, but like not so great for the longevity of my knits. But that being said, this is like a well-loved project that gets a lot of use by my cat in my home. This was a really fun stash busting project. I was even able to use scraps of yarn for the filling. I am definitely like that pack rat knitter that like saves all of like the little unusable scraps, and I like to save them for filling for projects like this. So this was a true stash busting project that I really like to make. And this is great for like really any weight, but mostly DK and worsted, but then you can use fingering weight held double as well. Next thing that I made is a recent make. This is my Lonely Leftovers vest by Wool and Beyond. I did have to buy like the main color to kind of get the look that I wanted, but I was able to incorporate a lot of different scraps held with, it's an unspun yarn, to kind of work my stash down a little bit. The border all came from my stash, and it was all yarns that I've used in projects previously. Finally, I'm working on the Stella quilt blanket, and I've also made the Sweet Shop blanket by Laura Penrose. Both of these projects I've actually purchased the yarn to make them, but if you're someone that has more of a larger stash, these would be great projects to start kind of incorporating your stash into. As you collect yarn, you can add squares to either of those blankets to create, you know, a nice stash busting project. I find that projects that you can use a lot of different colors and helpful. Because of the size of my stash, I can't necessarily make like a whole sweater with the yarn that I have in my stash, nor do I think like all the colors that I have would be that cohesive together. So finding these projects where I can kind of pull in a lot of different colors from my collection is really helpful. My last tip that I have that works for me is to buy as I go. So I don't necessarily do a whole lot of pre-buying or buying without intention of what I know I'm going to knit with something. For some people, they might like to do a big shop from like a web store and kind of buy a few sweater quantities and kind of like see where the creativity takes them. That doesn't work for me so well. So I really like to try to maybe buy 1 sweater quantity at a time, 1 or 2 sweater quantities. Maybe if I'm buying, I do a lot of online shopping, so maybe if I do buy a sweater quantity for something I know I want to buy, I buy a few skeins here and there of like a pretty yarn that maybe I want to make a hat or an accessory with. I try to keep buying things at a pace that I will reasonably use them. It is honestly kind of crazy to me that there's like an acronym that's like stash beyond, I don't even know what the beyond like use that you could be alive, like that. I think it's sable stash, I don't know. That kind of freaks me out, honestly. That is like my worst case scenario, and I'm not shaming, but like that is not the life that I'm going to lead. I don't want to have that much yarn in my home. That's not what I'm trying to achieve here. But again, you can really take any of these pieces of advice and make it work for what feels manageable for you without maybe like stifling your creative process or feeling like you're too restricted. So let's get into the organization. I definitely might have stuff I want to get rid of, maybe make more space in my yarn stash, and kind of get ready for a new season of knitting. Let's go. Oh boy. Let's lay out the sheet here. I just tried to move my coffee table and my Lego flowers went everywhere. We have Lego flowers because Sassy, my aforementioned cat, she loves to eat like any flower in sight, so we had to go for plastic. But now they're honestly even more annoying than real flowers because if you like look at them wrong, they kind of fall apart. They make me really happy. All right. Okay, I'm feeling like it's more than I expected. So we'll see. I'm regretting this immediately. Oh, there's more. One more bag. Okay. Okay, so I have all my yarn stash here all laid out. When you see it all laid out, it does feel a little bit overwhelming, huh? The last time I did this, I like to organize it first by things that are acrylic and things that are like natural fibers. And then I will kind of parse out the natural fibers from wool to plant-based. And then I like to kind of parse out kind of whole skeins from things that are a little less usable. So like right now I do have some sort of bag of little scraps because this helps me when I'm knitting scrappy projects to know exactly where the scraps are and what to do with them. So I don't think I'll take like all the scraps out of these bags just for my sanity, but I'll definitely show you kind of what I pulled out here. There's quite a mix. So let's get started and I'll show you what I end up with. I have things in a bit of a reasonable spot. I have some full skeins. I have a lot of white yarn that I have saved for some wedding knits as well. Put all the knitting for Olive in one spot. I decided it makes sense just because they're all the same weight, even though they're different kind of fiber contents. And I have some cotton yarns. I've kind of gotten my little vignette yarn baskets together. I pulled out some of my most colorful summertime, springtime yarns to kind of keep me inspired throughout the season, remind me that I have pretty things in my stash to work with, as well as these really beautiful yarns. These are from Hooks and Needles, and this is the Marla from Monoso Uruguay. And then I have some of my acrylics and super washes back here. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. One thing that I like to do is keep things in these white bags. This is like my scrap graveyard where the unusable scraps go. And then I've put any other scrap into this bag right here. We'll keep it handy for future stash busting projects. I'm going to put, I think, wedding stuff in one bag so I have it easy to go. Full skeins in another, as well as maybe the knitting for Olive and the cottons in another, and the acrylic in the last one finally. The only other bag I didn't mention is I have this little bag, and this is specifically for scraps for my Stella quilt blanket. These are specific because they can kind of be reused. They're very specific amounts and like in the mini skin color, so I want to keep these separate from everything else because they can actually be reworked into my blanket later. I also have these big not crinoline, but these big mesh bags from Wool Warehouse. I haven't done a Wool Warehouse order in a while. I used to be really into like the drops cotton and stuff, but I think I just have like enough to work with for this next summer. So let's make a little wedding bag. I have a smaller one, and I actually bought some white mohair as well for my wedding. And then I have this white silk from Knitting for Olive for the Ophelia top. I'm just gonna keep these separate because they're special. This next bag, I'm going to start with, I have this like chunky yarn. I have this chunky yarn from Originally Lovely. I was gifted this yarn. I actually made a scarf that I wear all the time, and I've just been holding on to it in case I want to make another accessory. I just like haven't gotten around to it. I have some yarn from, this is from my folklore cardigan, and so is this. That's good, like good wool. And like black and white, those are colors that you use. All right, I'm gonna change the setting because it's really hard to focus on the yarn when I'm in the frame. Okay, it's not as nice, but you can see the yarn more clearly. This is the Hooks and Needles yarn. I actually, looking at this, I think I'm gonna put it into my de-stash pile. I just don't see myself using this color. And I've already made the project from the box. So I'm gonna get rid of this into the de-stash pile. I'll show you what I'm getting rid of. As well as I have these skeins of Malabrigo in the bag. This is from Arcane Fiberworks. This was also gifted. And that's another thing I haven't really spoken about. Like I don't get like a lot of offers for people to give me yarn. I try to be judicious with that because I don't want like a huge influx of a lot of yarn like at once. It overwhelms me. It overwhelms the system really. Also gonna put, this is like technically a scrap, but it's quite big. This is the machelopis I have left over from my Lonely Leftovers vest. I definitely like need to knit something for Sassy with this because she loves this yarn. And I have some leftover mohair from more wedding knits that I did for my girls. Not my bridesmaids, but my girls. And next we'll do Knitting for Olive. I just can't get myself to get rid of this silk. I got this for the Milady's dress a few summers ago. It was a failed project, but the yarn is so pretty and it's nice. So one day I think I'll use it. I have some black cotton merino, which is like pretty simple, pretty standard. I think simple colors like that. I have some brown merino. One Knitting for Olive thing I'm getting rid of is this cotton merino because I hate this color. It's just not my color. And then I have some, this is still from my Anchor sweater. I tried to use some in my vest, still working on it, and this beautiful red, my mixed rib tank. I think I need to make like a little scarf or a little scarflet with that color. This is like the Drops fingering weight cotton. It's so old, I don't remember when I bought it. As well as I pulled out some more substantial fingering weight or like more substantial like cotton merino or cotton scraps just because I felt like I like having, that's not really consistent because there's merino in this bag, but I like having these yarns together. That is cotton and Knitting for Olive specifically. Next is just acrylic. Cool, cool. And then I have this for the acrylic, I think. I haven't done this Christmas, but I like to keep some Christmas colors of acrylic yarns for like Christmas ornaments and things like that. You can definitely, like that's another great stash busting set of projects is like a ton of different Christmas ornament projects out there that you can use. So I have this like dark green. Oh, I made Austin his first sweater in this yarn. This is Swish by Knit Picks. I have a lot of this line brand Hue in Me because I made a tapestry, and at first I had this idea I was gonna have matching tapestries hanging in my living room wall, but after I made the first one I didn't really like the look of it. I made it with the blue and the white, and I just never made the yellow one, but I really like this project and I think it could be really good for some kind of home project that I just haven't made yet. So that's why I'm holding on to it. These are trim straps for my baby cousin's sweet shop blanket that I made few years ago, and this is Barocco Ultra Wool, which is their super wash. Look how pretty those colors are for a little baby boy. And now he's like more than 1 year old, and he's so cute. My mom was babysitting him on Thursday, and I just got to FaceTime and like mumble, no, like do like baby talk with him. So it was very fun. I'm a very good remote babysitter. That's our last bag, so let's take an aerial view of the stash. All right, so here's the organized chaos of the yarn stash slash collection. We have wedding yarn, more wool, full skeins, natural fiber slash knitting for olive, scraps that are usable, scraps for filling, and acrylic scraps. I then have my little display pieces to keep me inspired, as well as my Stella blanket bag that has all my Stella blanket yarns in it. And then here is what I'm giving away. Not as good lighting over here, but it's acrylic, some hooks and needles, some really old sock yarn that I don't envision. I have some, what are these? Cage swatches that I can put on my board, as well as some knitting for olive. Oh, what's this? Into the bag of unusables you go. So that's a look. Let's all put it back in the ottoman. Here's a peek at the ottoman. I do even have some other things in here like polyfill and like some Christmas decorations, as well as my ball winder and Swift that I always like puzzle back in. But this is a look. And also this is just like the ottoman for scale. It's not huge, but it's definitely enough to keep what I need. I have some bags of yarn, 1, 2 that I'm ready to give away to some of my neighbors, and I'm feeling a little bit more clear-minded and kind of understanding of what I have in my stash. I want to hear all of your thoughts about keeping a yarn stash. How do you keep yours manageable? How do you stash down? And how do you organize it as well? I would love to hear about how you all see it and view it and do it. Thanks for tuning in to this episode, and I hope to see y'all soon. Bye.